Safety Committee to order. Good morning to all of our guests. We have a very important agenda to get through this morning. I want to welcome our city solicitors, Attorney Nestor. Thank you so much for being here. Captain Fink, thank you so much for being here. Courtney Porter for clerking. My legislative aide, Courtney Hauser, for all of her work in pulling together the agenda. We are going to have two presentations this morning, one in light of this being Black History Month. I have invited our Sentinel president here, President Hawkins, and Specialist Scotty Johnson, who was a previous Sentinel president in his career with the Cincinnati Police Department, to really have a discussion about African-American officers and their contributions to the Cincinnati Police Department. And it's a very rich history, and I thought that this being Black History Month, this would be a great opportunity to do that. The second item we will have on our agenda is the item regarding body cameras, and there's a lot of discussion about that. I want to urge the public to really dial into that discussion, and all of my colleagues were invited to be a part of this presentation. They might or might not join this committee today. But the conversation about body cameras and how we roll it out, this is to the citizens who are listening, and the amount of support that we need to have to maintain our systems of information and how public information requests are managed is just as important as the physical body cameras themselves. And I want the public to really listen to the totality of that presentation and understand how many years the Cincinnati Police Department has been working on body cameras. So we're not reacting to things that have happened. This has been a process that the Cincinnati Police Department has been looking at for years. I want to acknowledge my Vice Chair, Kevin Flynn, who has joined us, and I want to turn over this meeting to Specialist Scotty Johnson and Sentinel President Hawkins. Thank you and welcome.
Mr. Chairman, we greatly appreciate this opportunity to share this rich history of African American promotions along with the Sentinel Police Association. To my knowledge, this is the first time this opportunity has been extended to the Sentinel Police Association along with in presenting this level of history. So I greatly appreciate this opportunity, and on behalf of the Sentinel Police Association, President Hawkins, we thank you for this opportunity. I won't I won't take a lot of time, but briefly, in 1802 is when the first Cincinnati Police Department came into existence. It was, our first marshal was James Smith, and the department was run at that time by citizens throughout the city, within the city limits, all men over the age of 18 years of age. They were given a time frame in which they were to patrol the city. If they missed their time frame, then they were then fined. So this was the first in 1802 when the Cincinnati Police, when there was some level of law enforcement organization within the city of Cincinnati, which I found to be extremely interesting. As we go forward, in 1862, the Black Brigade was established, and a little history on the Black Brigade is that when the Confederate Army was advancing through Kentucky and threatening to come into the city of Cincinnati, then those watchmen at that time gathered up to go and defend the city limits. Well, they found out they didn't have enough watchmen based on the information that was coming about the amount of the Confederate Army. At that point in time, they rounded up all of the black men in the city of Cincinnati, and they were not exactly deputized, but they were told that you will be there to assist in defending the city limits. So the Black Brigade was established in 1862. Further, a little bit later on, after the Black Brigade showed that they were well able to assist in keeping the law of the land in the city of Cincinnati, a big congratulations came forward for the time and the work that they had done, but they still were not able to be hired as watchmen in the city of Cincinnati. As we advanced to 1884, the first African American appointed to become a watchman was Harry Hagman. And Harry's appointment was not necessarily done out of any kindness. It was actually done in retaliation, depending on who you believe and what you read. The Democratic Party hired Harry Hagman as a direct insult to the Republican Party. And Harry was placed outside at that point the local newspaper, which they considered to be Republican ran, and they placed Harry outside the editor-in-chief's office, and that was his only assignment, was to stand there and irritate the editor-in-chief of the local newspaper, depending on who you believe, that was Republican run at that time. Later on, in 1884, the first African American was appointed as a detective, and his name was James Allen. James Allen was the first African American detective appointed in the Cincinnati Police Department. As we move further in 1897, there was a Frank A.B. Hall, who I found this very interesting. He retired from the police department and then later became a councilman between 1926 and 1927. So there's a lot of rich history as Councilman Thomas and Councilman Young retired and became councilmen. The first was Frank A.B. Hall in 1897. In 1947, the first African-American women were hired, Novella Craddock and Lillian Grigsby. They were hired in 1947. What was interesting about this, though, is that they could only be hired as police women. They were assigned to youth aid and the juvenile division. It wasn't until around 1974, 1975 that the first woman was actually hired as a police cadet, went through the police academy, and actually graduated and served as a Cincinnati police officer. Later on, as we move forward, the first African-American sergeant, first to be promoted to sergeant, was Cleveland Lawson, September 16th, 1949. I'm sorry. Cleveland Lawson, September 16th, 1949. Later on, in March 1st of 1953, the first African-American promoted to the rank of lieutenant was also Cleveland Lawson. So Cleveland Lawson was a trailblazer when it came to promotions within the Cincinnati Police Department. Later on, in 1968, there's a little gap there. Later on in 1968, 1966, let me back up a little bit. The first police specialist, the detective rank in 1966 was abolished, and people were promoted to the rank of specialists, which is now abolished again. That lets you know you've been around a long time when the rank that you hold is no longer around. But in 1966, the first African Americans promoted to the rank of police specialists, there were 6 of them: Garvey Sanders, Handy Matthews, Dr. Richard Rhodes, George Gaines, Paul Allen, and Kenny Davis. Those were the first in 1966 when the rank of specialist was developed. Those were the first African Americans to make the rank of specialists. As we fast forward to 1972, the first African American promoted to the rank of captain was William Bull Neal. And he had a saying that, as I talked to some older African Americans, he had a saying that he talked about delicious assignments, and that had to deal with preferred assignments, homicide, those assignments now that you have African Americans representing every one of those assignments. They were considered delicious assignments by Captain Bull Neal. Until last week, when you saw the history being made with the 3 African-American captains, we still had only, in the 200-plus year history, had 7 African-American captains that rose to the rank in the police department. And they were Bull Neal, Captain Arthur Harmon, Captain Bernie Williams, Captain Lonnie Cotton, Captain Ronald J. Twitty, Captain Michael Curitan, and then our present chief, at that time, Captain Elliot Isaacs. So in a 200-plus year history, there still were only 7 African Americans that had risen to the rank of captain. With the 3 that were appointed last week, you now have a total of 10, which Captain Kimberly Williams made history in becoming the first African American female in the history of the police department. Fast forward to 1991, Police Sergeant Gina Irvin was the first African American female promoted to the rank of sergeant. Later on, in July of 1998, the first African American to rise to the rank of lieutenant colonel was Lieutenant Colonel Ronald J. Twitty. Later on in that same year, the first African American female to rise to the rank of lieutenant was Lieutenant Denise Carpenter. From the rank of lieutenant colonel to date, in the 200-plus year history of the Cincinnati Police Department, you've still only had 3. That was Lieutenant Ronald J. Twitty, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Curitan, and our present chief, Chief Elliot Isaacs. As I stated earlier, now for the rank of chief, we've had 3 in the 200-plus year history. The first, of course, was on August 2nd, 2011, was Chief James Craig. Chief Jeffrey Blackwell followed him, and now our present chief, Elliot Isaacs. February 10th was a history maker, as I repeated before, of this year, when Captain Kimberly Williams rose to the rank of police captain. With all these promotions and all the things that have transpired over the history of the Cincinnati Police Department, you got to give credit to one organization that has been stalwart and steadfast, immovable through all of the history of the Cincinnati Police Department, and that is the Sentinel Police Association. It was the Black Police Association initially, but in 1968, they adopted the name of Sentinel as watchman for the city of Cincinnati. 3-legged stool in which the Sentinel Police Association stood on. First and foremost, the hiring principles within the Cincinnati Police Department. Second, those delicious assignments that Captain Bull Neal alluded to, preferred assignments. And third leg of that stool was promotions within the Cincinnati Police Department. I would like to add a 4th leg that we saw that took place in 2001, especially police community relations. The Sentinel Police Association was developing police community relations way before it became sexy and a catchphrase across the country. The Sentinels were that olive branch, so to speak, that was extended into the community. So there was clear understanding on why we did what we did and how we did it. And I can sit here and say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I learned a lot of my predecessors that were presidents of the Sentinel Police Association. The Sentinel Police Association is clearly a breeding ground for success. And let me read you some of the accomplishments past presidents have gone on to accomplish. Dr. Richard Rhodes, PhD. Captain Arthur Harmon, trailblazer. The legendary Artie Crum, past president. Our Councilman Wendell Young, former president of the NAACP here locally, as you well know, Mr. Smitherman. As we continue on, community activist and community council president Roger Davis. As we move on, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Curitin, that went on to become a chief of police at the University of Cincinnati. Chief of Police Clarence Williams, Riviera Beach, Florida, who is now a candidate also for the county commission seat in Riviera Beach down there. Lieutenant Aaron Taylor, our own past Councilman Cecil Thomas, who is now a senator with the state of Ohio. Cheryl Thomas. Cheryl Thomas was the first African-American female president of the Sentinel Police Association. I'd mentioned Lieutenant Aaron Taylor, Philip Black, who is now president of the local Alpha Phi Alpha chapter here in the city of Cincinnati. Our Sergeant Carolyn Wilson, Jean Say, entrepreneur, retired business owner. Our present President Eddie Hawkins and myself truly have all served in the capacity of president of this phenomenal organization. As I wrap up here, and like I said, once again, I greatly appreciate this opportunity to present this history. When the book of Deuteronomy speaks about worms coming to attempt to ruin the crop that is being planted. The seeds that have been planted by the Sentinel Police Association over the years are evident now. The Bible also talks about in Ecclesiastes, there's a time and a season for everything. Where those seeds that were planted by the Sentinel Police Association years ago are now becoming quite evident. You have African American Chief, the third now, the first Chief Elliot Isaac that rose up through the ranks in the Sentinel Police Association. You have Captain Kimberly Williams, the first at this point to become a captain in the Cincinnati Police Department. So with there being a time and a season for everything, as it speaks of in Ecclesiastes, those seeds that were planted are now you're starting to see the fruits of the labor. The seeds that were planted, you're now seeing the olive branch that the Sentinel Police Association attempted to be over the years to make sure there was clear understanding and clear dialogue between the police and the community and within the police department. Because of the Sentinel Police Association, the city of Cincinnati is a better place to live, and I can definitely say the Cincinnati Police Department is a better place to work. Everywhere the Sentinels have gone, we've tried to make an inroads where there's clear understanding and deep appreciation from where we come from. The Sentinel Police Association, the entire history can't be told because history continues on. And we'll continue to make sure that we stay stalwart, immovable when it comes to equality and justice, not only within the police department, but within the city of Cincinnati. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Smitherman, Mr. Flynn, for this opportunity to tell this story. And I want to turn it over to our current president, Eddie Hawkins, if he has anything to offer.
As usual, Specialist Johnson does a good job, and as he said, we do not want to take up any more of your time. I would just like to say that being a fruit of the labor from which has been, the honor has been bestowed upon me to lead the organization, I see it as a challenge to continue to extend the olive branch that have always been out there in the communities, and by doing that, showing the leadership that we show within the department by working hand in hand with the FOP, showing that there is no division in the department, that we are truly trying to move forward as one. And I think that being leaders in the community, showing that effort firsthand on our part goes a long way when we go out into the community. So what our challenge now is to continue to move forward with repairing and making our communities better. That's a job that I take seriously. And within the department, to continue to show that we are all going to stand on one platform and make sure that all officers are treated fairly. And like I said, Specialist Johnson always does a good job, and we do not want to take up any more of your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to tell our history.
Well, first, President, you're not taking up all of our time. And we appreciate all of your service to the city of Cincinnati. And we appreciate the Sentinels and the rich history and its contribution to the Cincinnati Police Department and to the citizens of Cincinnati. So there is no rush. This is Black History Month, and I thought it most appropriate to take the time to have a public discussion about the Sentinel's contribution to our community. And to Specialist Johnson, let me say, if you haven't been ordained as the historian, you now are the historian. And I thought that your presentation was comprehensive and insightful. One of the things history is a living organism, and connecting the dots so everyone has an understanding of how much work has gone in to the accomplishments that we see that look routine are not routine at all. Last week was historic, and there was a tremendous amount of work from the 1800s all the way now to 2016 to actually see a seed that has now grown, and there now is a tree that we all can see. And I thought you did a beautiful job of making that connection. Now, there are two things that I think must do. I need to change my attention to our great Attorney Nestor. So, Attorney Nestor, I'd like to ask, as the chair of Law and Public Safety, for you to work directly with Specialist Johnson to create a proclamation from this committee on behalf of the Sentinels. What I want to do as the vice chair, and I can feel him nodding, from the institution of the Law and Public Safety Committee, I want to acknowledge the work of the Sentinels. That is different, because what happens is that now is on the record for the next 1,000 years. It's there in the body of the work of the city. So all of the information that you've articulated, I'd like to include that in a beautiful proclamation that once it's created, and I don't want to rush, I want to take our time. We don't have to present it during Black History Month. It might happen in July, it might happen in August, but I want the work to start happening so we capture, and you can then interface with the Sentinels about whose names or how you want it written, so that we take our time. You might even take it to a Sentinel meeting, President, so they can see it, and then you all have an agreement, because it's a very important document. And on the floor of council, we then will stand as a committee. So I want it, the key here in the vision that I have with this, Attorney Nestor, is that it's coming from the chair of Law and Public Safety and its committee members. And of course, it is being presented in front of the body of all of council and the city. And it won't happen at a law meeting. It will be presented on a Wednesday at a general session of council. So the mayor is here presiding while we present it, and then any guest who'd like to be here. Now, we could wait and do that at a Sentinel ball. We could wait and do it at a Sentinel meeting, but it doesn't have the same impact, Mr. President, to do it while we're here on the floor of council in the body, so that we're codifying it in the history, and that's incredibly important. The second thing I want to commit to is I want to work with the Sentinels. With my work, I'm putting on my financial planning hat, and I want to work with you in the next 60 days to create a foundation at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation on behalf of the Sentinels. So I'm going to work with you in the next 60 days, put that hat on. I will financially support the seeding of that foundation. So what happens here is that we're putting something in place in perpetuity so that youth can get scholarship money from the Sentinels, and then as you have your different events, you can continue to add money to the foundation and then give out scholarships on an annual basis to young people. And it doesn't have to be young people who are trying to be a police officer, just young people who are trying to better themselves. But I think there are two ways you do that. One is a proclamation, and the second is through money, through the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, because we take the same history and we embed it in a foundation, and that then is there in perpetuity. So in the next 60 days, you and I will have a meeting with the Greater Cincinnati Foundation and the president. We will go down, I'll work with you. I will bring my own cash to help support, seed it, because there's a number, there are minimum numbers, and we're not going to get into all of that. The key is that we make it happen. Does that make sense?
Mr. Smitherman, I'm blown away by those gestures. As I stated when I started out, this opportunity has never been provided. And for the young people and the young police officers, you said something very, very substantive. This history did not evolve overnight. This is something that has been years, decades and decades of work, staying on the grind, keeping your nose to the grind to make sure future generations of police officers have it better. I stand on the shoulders of those men, Dr. Rick Rhodes, Wendell Young, Cecil Thomas, Clarence Williams, Mike Curitan, Roger Davis, Arthur Harmon. I stand on their shoulders, Mel Taylor, Lieutenant Mel Taylor, all of them were before me as presidents, Cheryl Thomas. I stand on their shoulders, and I am honored to represent this organization. I'm honored to represent the Cincinnati Police Department, my 30th year of serving the citizens of Cincinnati. And this is not something we take lightly, having this opportunity to share the rich history of this phenomenal organization. Talking about money real fast, there was a time when you were called into the sergeant's office because our paychecks were wide open. Our checks would just show up and they weren't closed. And if a supervisor looked and saw that your contribution, the money you earned, was going to payroll deduction, which was a huge deal in itself when the Sentinels got payroll deduction, and saw that some of your finances were going toward the Sentinel Police Association, you were called in and asked those questions. So we have evolved from the divide and conquer to standing as one, as Eddie alluded to, with the FOP. So those are things that we've come a long way. We haven't reached Camelot yet, but we're trying to get there. And when you talk about the opportunity to be able to present and be respected because you were a past president of the Sentinel Police Association, it says a whole lot. And please, thank you for giving this opportunity, because in my 30 years, this is something that has never been done, and this opportunity has never presented itself.
I think the beautiful vision of having the current chief, Isaac, and having the president of the Sentinels here together for a proclamation. The beautiful thing you said, and I consistently hear this, that the Sentinels and the FOP are working so closely together, more than I have seen in the last 10 to 15 years. And I'm just throwing that out as a number, but it is very, very encouraging to see. And what I hope happens is, as the Sentinels are having events and as the FOP are having events, that I constantly see that cross-pollination, but also respecting the history that the Sentinels, their contributions of those officers without the Sentinels, pressing the consciousness of Cincinnati, it wouldn't have happened. And so that's so important for officers, all officers, to see and appreciate and to embrace, because it's not a division, it's saying this is a history that we have to hold on to because it's so powerful and so beautiful and so much a part of who we are.
Well, you said it. It is because of the Sentinel Police Association, the city is better, the police department is better. So you're absolutely right. It's a collective effort. It's not a divided effort. It's a collective effort in which inroads have been made to where we have become, and we can always get better, but we have become the best police department in the country. I think you know this. In 2001, you couldn't have put a gun to my head and told me to say, this is the best police department in the country. I would not have said it. But now as I sit here 30 years in, 15 years later, I can say this is the best police department in the country, and a lot of that has to do because of the work of the Sentinel Police Association. I thank you tremendously for this opportunity.
And I see my colleague, Councilmember Young, entering. Would you like to add something, Councilmember Young? No? Your name has been spoken at least 10 times, and Specialist Johnson has said he's on your shoulders. So that's wonderful. But when we do that presentation, Specialist Johnson and President Hawkins, I think one of the key things that we do is that we add the names within that proclamation. And so we don't want to rush it so that we don't miss anybody, right? The key is that we let it get cold. But to our city solicitor, this is a very important document to create and spend our time doing, so that when it's completed and the mayor signs it, we've done a good job of capturing that history for the city. Councilmember Young, welcome, and thank you for your service. We've heard about the presidency and your contribution to the Cincinnati Police Department this morning, and I salute you for your contribution. Councilmember Young.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smitherman. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to hear what was said, but I'm going to take the chance to say that Scotty Johnson and Eddie Hawkins are two officers I've known for a long time. I've known both of them their entire careers. Eddie Hawkins actually was a student of my wife when he was a kid in school. So I've known them that long. I kind of guess perhaps what may have been said about me. That's really not the important part. But I did get a chance, Mr. Chair, to hear you offer some assistance to the Sentinels around establishing a scholarship fund of some sort. And I appreciate you offering them that, and I certainly hope they take advantage. The police department's come a long way, and I hope that that's been said too. When I joined the police department back in 1967, there were roughly 42 black officers, none of them in command positions. To see a Sentinel as the head of the department is certainly something I wish that the founders of the Sentinels could have lived to see. It was always a dream, but that dream was not just seeing that. That dream was that their efforts would make the department better. I did get a chance in the back of the room to hear Specialist Johnson say that he would call Cincinnati Police Department the best in the nation today. I agree with him. Doesn't mean we have a perfect police department, but Lord, has it come a long way. And the efforts of the Sentinels cannot be overlooked. I also had the opportunity to hear you say that there was a partnership that did not exist when I was an officer between the FOP and the Sentinel Police Association. My observation is that that relationship is a far better relationship than the one that was a very contentious relationship when I was the president of the Sentinels. That was an ugly time in the police department. But I don't want to dwell on the past. I want to look at today and look toward the future, because I think it's really hard to move forward if you're only going to look backward. And I say that moving forward, there's some good things that happen. Now, I'm no fan of the way that Elliot Isaac became the chief of police, but I am very much a fan of Elliot Isaac. I've known him his entire career, and I do believe he's a good pick. And I do believe that he will do good work for the police department. But there's finally an opportunity for African-American officers to demonstrate that they're not only a part of the team, they can also lead. And I have noticed over the years that African Americans and females, because Sentinels fought for women to also be in the police department, are enjoying leadership positions in the police department they never had a chance to have before. And I've got to tell you, that is in large part due to the work of the Sentinel Police Association, because they're the ones who fought that fight and drug some other people along kicking and screaming into beginning to understand that equality in the police department is extremely important, especially in an urban department that, in my opinion, and so far the opinion of many others, needs to look like the people it serves. And so in that regard, I simply want to say kudos to the police department, kudos to Chief Isaac, kudos to two men that I really have the world's greatest respect for. And by extension, I have respect for the entire police department. We're talking about the Sentinels today, but I can tell you that one of my recruits is a captain, right? No, are you assistant chief now? Okay, he's a captain in the police department. I always tease him and said he's going to be chief. Your turn's coming, Doug, it really is. But at the end of the day, thank you for this meeting. I'm sorry I missed it. I was told what was going on. I tried to run in here and catch it all, but I hope that I haven't taken too much time. But I do want to say congratulations to everybody. And the people who founded the Sentinels, I think two of the charter members, I think, other than myself, are still around, but Handy Matthews and Rick Rhodes. Handy Matthews, who I'm told has had both legs amputated now. And I'm also told that Rick Rhodes is not in the world's best health, but I wish all the founders could be here to see this and to hear a committee of Cincinnati City Council commend the Sentinels on their work, I think is huge. So again, I thank you. Kudos to the police department, kudos to the Sentinels. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Young, I know you're a humble man, but I know what you have, the blood, sweat, and tears that you have provided to this organization. I know in my presidency and still today, 24 hours a day, I can pick up the phone and call Wendell Young. So he's humble in saying it's really not about him. But had it not been for the Wendell Youngs, the Handy Matthews, the Rick Rhodes, the Artie Crumbs, the Arthur Harmons, those that laid the foundation, I really don't believe we would be sitting here today being able to be acknowledged and really respected because of the blood, sweat, and tears that these gentlemen laid. From death threats, I got them, I'm sure Mr. Young can tell you, from death threats to where we are now. I don't take that lightly. I've told you privately and I say it publicly. I greatly appreciate you letting a young man sit under you and learn from you to get to where I am in life. You've been a mentor, and I greatly appreciate the time you took as a little 22-year-old police officer with a head full of hair coming in and trying to learn this system. I can't say it enough, but it's because of you and those gentlemen that we named that we stand here proudly today. Thank you, Wendell Young. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Scotty, and let me add that there were some women. So there was Novella Noble and Lil Grigsby were the two women there, and later on, Eileen Norris. And so there have been some women along the way, too, who have also been very helpful. That's a good thing about the Sentinels. We always recognized that it was not just a male effort. So from the very beginning, there were women.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much to add. I remember when the promotions were announced and the chair and I were talking with Specialist Johnson, and he was rattling off the history then. We said, everyone has to hear this. This is so important. And one of the things that I think that people don't recognize enough is that these promotions to captain, to lieutenant, to sergeant are based on merit and merit alone. And people are being given the opportunity. And we talked some about how at times in the past that wasn't always true. That that people would game the system, and if there was an African American ready for promotion, they'd let that list expire and then give a new test. And some of these folks have studied for a year to take the test. And so it's with great pride that I can agree with you that Cincinnati has the best police department in the country, and it's due to the efforts of long-timers like you, Scotty, and everyone else, and Wendell, and Chief Isaacs, and thank you.
What I want to do, Councilmember Young, is I've asked Specialist Johnson, and he's educated me that that rank doesn't exist anymore. He said he's been around long enough that that rank doesn't even exist, but Specialist...
See, when you're old.
But what we want to do is have Specialist Johnson work with Attorney Nestor to create a document that can be presented to council of all of the names embedded in a document. So somebody 1,000 years from now can come and review that document. Now, obviously, it's a working, there's going to be new history, but the last captain, the female name, I think, should be in a document like that in order for young people to go back and look at it. And I want to be a part of that as the chair of Law and Public Safety, and to have that presented to all of council and to invite all of the leadership that wants to be there to accept this as a family. I would be honored to have any of the founders or their family members who can be present to be there, and for obviously Councilmember Young and Thomas to be there, and our chief to be there, so that we can really send a united message that this is important history, and it's important for us to stop and recognize it institutionally. I mean, we can talk about it in a ballroom, but we want to make sure that we talk about it within the body of the institution, and I think that's new. All right. Thank you all so much for your presentation. Thank you so much for coming in. I'm going to now invite our city manager forward, and I appreciate you being patient, and our Chief Isaac, and Captain Doug Wiseman, all to come forward to talk about, again, something that is incredibly progressive. I mean, the way I want to articulate this subject matter to the city of Cincinnati is that this is a movement or a project within the department that has been going on for a long time. And I think to all of our presenters, it's important to articulate that to the public. We aren't reacting to what is happening in the country. This is something that we've been working on, and we're trying to get it right where so many municipalities have gotten it wrong. And I think that's what continues to separate our fine Cincinnati Police Department from other departments, not knee-jerk reactions. I thought that, City Manager, your style approximately 90 days ago, and it might have been 6 months ago, where you brought in each of the council members to educate us all about body cameras, was a very important and strategic move on your part. Having the knee-jerk reactions of introducing motions and trying to set arbitrary deadlines and timelines really doesn't allow us to roll out body cameras in a way that augments what our Cincinnati Police Department, what you're doing, but also augments our relationship with our community. So I want to turn the meeting over now to you, City Manager, Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, just very briefly, also want to acknowledge Sergeant Smith, who has been living, eating, sleeping, and breathing body cameras for, I think,
give him a round of applause.
The last 3 years.
And a young lady sitting there.
And the other folks from the police department, I know they were doing testing on police cameras well before anybody else even heard of body cameras. And the city made a commitment in the fall of this year to go to the International Association of the Chiefs of Police conference in Chicago. I was there with them, and I'm glad we didn't react too quickly, because a lot of the deficiencies that were found in earlier versions of the body cameras, whether it was this brand had strengths and weaknesses and this brand had kind of the opposite strengths and weaknesses, what we found was that by waiting till the trade show came out, they both raised their game so that their weaknesses were no longer weaknesses. And I'm really looking forward to this presentation because I think it will show the in-depth study that has gone on, not just about which piece of hardware gets worn, but how we conduct the storage, how we conduct the redaction, and all of those time and money consuming issues that a responsible city manager has to consider along with this project. So with that,
City Manager, thank you so much. Everyone has to hold the mics this morning.
Okay.
So we apologize.
We'll do that. As a segue from the previous presentation, I just want to again emphasize and reiterate the monumental nature of what took place last week in terms of various promotions. Again, we appointed 4 assistant chiefs, one of whom is the second female to ever have been appointed an assistant chief for the city of Cincinnati. That is Assistant Chief Thigi. In addition, we had 9 other promotions at the captain, lieutenant, and sergeant level. And of those 9 promotions, 6 of those entailed African Americans and a female African American. Again, as Police Specialist Scotty Johnson mentioned, that's all based on merit. This is not affirmative action. These individuals tested. They excelled in the testing, and they also excelled in the additional assessment process. So I wanted to acknowledge that as well. So tremendous progress, and we look forward to continuing that progress into the future.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question about that. I read something in the paper today about issues because we were creating new positions relative to the communications center. Is that holding up any of these promotions, or are we still going to be able to move forward with them? Just get some clarification on that issue.
Yes, those promotions have taken place. They took place last week. So what we're trying to do in terms of shoring up and strengthening our overall effectiveness as relates to the ECC is not impaired at all. That's moving forward. There was an issue last week, but in terms of where we are with that, in terms of backfilling some positions, what we've decided that we're going to do with the existing lieutenant and sergeant's list will be to just let them organically expire. However, as vacancies, normal organic vacancies occur, they will be filled in accordance with those 2 lists. However, at the conclusion or at the end of those lists, when they expire, we will basically retest. I don't know if Chief Isaacs would like to add anything to that or not.
I think that basically captures where we are. So I know there was some concern about lists being expired early. The managers determined that that will not take place. They will proceed as they are posted.
I want to publicly say on the record to the city manager, to our chief, to Captain Wiseman, as you're here, that that makes the most sense to me. And I appreciate, as the chairman, your leadership around that very sensitive issue. And I'll leave it there. I thank you for that. I think it again illustrates the insightfulness of our manager and our chief, and the turning of a new leaf of making sure that we are respecting the processes, respecting our contracts, respecting our colleagues, respecting those who have tested, however you want to dress it up. But we want to make sure that we keep the morale of our police department always intact, as you are doing, and that you are sending, I think, a clear message of fairness. And I always like to see that and hear that as the chairman of Law and Public Safety. So I thank you for your leadership on how you have handled and made decisions around that matter. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Getting started with the body-worn camera program presentation, again, as Councilman Flynn acknowledged Sergeant Smith, I also want to acknowledge 3 other individuals who have been so critical to getting us to this point of moving forward with the implementation of a body-worn camera program, and that would be Elizabeth Wetzel of my office, Chris Bigham, our budget director, as well as Captain Doug Weissman, who's sitting right next to me, and you're going to hear from him very shortly. In terms of where we are from a financial standpoint with this program, we have $700,000 of general capital funding and another $2 million of general fund transfer that you all approved last year. Clearly, this is getting us started. There are a lot of unknowns out there, particularly once we go fully live with the program, and I'm quite sure additional funds will be needed, and obviously we will keep you all apprised as to what that is. When we received the charge from the council to initiate proceeding with the pursuit of a body-worn camera program, we established a body-worn camera committee, which also has 5 subcommittees. One subcommittee deals with looking at operations, data management and data access, sworn officer concerns, equipment specifications, and public officials' expectations and awareness. The subcommittees have been meeting regularly and report back to the larger committee on a regular basis. What we have been focusing in on are community stakeholder meetings. Again, this is a very complex initiative. It will become an integral part of how we police and how the public engages our policing. So community stakeholder meetings are very critical. Community input and involvement is critical. We have had stakeholder meetings with a myriad of organizations. We've sent formal letters inviting various groups such as the American Civil Liberties Union, the Cincinnati Black United Front, Human Relations Commission, Greater Cincinnati Criminal Defense Lawyers Association, Hamilton County Public Defender's Office, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Urban League, Hispanic Chamber, and many, many others. So we've had one round of community stakeholder meetings, and it's intended that we will have at least one more round, if not 2 more rounds. We've taken sworn officers, we've initiated sworn officer surveys. Again, we want to understand how the rank and file views this particular subject matter, what might be some concerns, some considerations that we need to keep in mind as we proceed with developing the program. We've been looking at legal best practices from all over the country, looking at what other jurisdictions have done. There's no one ideal best practice that's out there. This is new across the country, so we're sort of designing and building something concurrently and operationalizing it, and once I assume and expect that once we fully deploy our program, we'll have to go back periodically and make adjustments and further perfect it. Looking at yes, sir.
Mr. City Manager, I would just say that given the research that's been happening at this department, I would say we are going to be the ones that are the best practice that other people are going to be looking at. All the more reason why it's so important that we get it right, but people are really going to be looking at us because they know that we put the effort in, and I know that's not just in smaller localities in Hamilton County, but nationwide, people are going to be looking at the Cincinnati Police Department as to what the best practices are.
I think we're positioned to do just that, Councilman, and that's our goal. We've done tremendous work in terms of looking at body-worn camera product research, looking at the various types of body cameras, looking at pre-recording options, battery life, cloud, local or hybrid storage, and software programs of many different types. Captain Weissman will talk about the policy considerations, and then I'll talk more about where we are in terms of the procurement and the subsequent activity taking place pursuant to that procurement. Captain Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you, Councilmember Flynn, for being here. It's an honor to be here today. And in addition to the names that the city manager mentioned on the city team, there's other folks over my left shoulder back here that deserve a lot of credit for all of the hard work and thoughtfulness and intellectual research that they have done to get where we are at today. So I want to thank everybody over there for their hard work, because there's some people that were not mentioned that are sitting over there today that have done a lot of hard work. So regarding policy considerations, the topic that I'm talking about on this slide is the policy considerations for public records request, which I got to tell you is a hot topic throughout the entire country. So many jurisdictions throughout the country are juggling how they're going to move on this. Right now, our current law, which is what I'll talk about, video is subject to public records release. So the pros to that and the cons to that are this. So the pros to the current Ohio state law for public records request would be that it's very transparent. And in the same vein of the collaborative agreement and our commitment to transparency, that's a good thing. The CLEAR exemption exists for us, so CLEAR, C-L-E-I-R, stands for the Confidential Law Enforcement Investigatory Record. So we can use that exemption to hold back a record during the course of an investigation so that it doesn't compromise that investigation until it is adjudicated through the courts. The cons to this regarded to policy consideration is just the sheer volume of video that we will amass with 700 officers recording video and putting them on the servers. It'll be the time and cost to review, redact, and process that video for records requests. So we're looking for just a good balance of that under the current law. And we know we're going to be dealing with that. And also, our department and our city's commitment to balancing the citizens' privacy. So the video is going to record a lot of stuff. It'll record the victims in the worst moments of their lives, witnesses and people standing around that will be captured on these videos that will be released in public records and likely placed on YouTube and other social media venues. As I flip to the next slide, and I'm trying to do both of these, here we go. So our committee's recommendations for some of the more important policy considerations, one would be the record retention period for the actual video that we record. And we are going to align that the same as the in-car camera videos that we use in our cars, the MVRs. We're looking at a 90-day retention for most video. We actually worked with the Harvard Cyber Clinic Law Department to do some research for us throughout the country, and they also are making a recommendation that most other practical body camera programs in the country are hovering right around the 90-day retention for just normal video that we have that is not going to be used for something else. Certainly for video that we are going to tag as being needed for court or for administrative use of force investigations, we would hold that video longer. But for stuff that we don't need, we would dump it after 90 days. And that is aligned with what other departments are doing throughout the country. As far as data storage, we do have to maintain some thoughtfulness and respect to the CJIS compliancy that the FBI puts out. And so we are heading in the direction significantly towards cloud database storage. It is all integrated. The redaction software is integrated with that system. We are going to, both the vendors that we have chosen are using Microsoft Azure, which has been set up by the government and the FBI. So as Ryan Smith describes it, it's people in lab coats with white gloves and hats and taking care of all of this, you know, shiny equipment. And it is a redundant system, so there are systems all over the country so that it is backed up. And so that is the direction that policy or the committee is recommending. And the CPD records section and also the prosecutor's office will have access to the video so that they can get in there and get to it also. Regarding staffing for the city to put on this program here, it is going to require some evaluation process. And as we are testing the systems right now, we are trying to track how long it will take to do the redaction and review of videos, not only in our records section, but the prosecutor's office is also tracking how long they will have to sit at a computer screen to redact stuff for discovery for defense counsel. So that is being done. And we are doing a very streamlined evaluation process to determine the proper levels of staffing that we'll need in the records section and also in the law department.
With respect to where we are in terms of the overall procurement process, between October and December, we launched a procurement, and we identified 2 firms who scored the highest with respect to that process. One of the companies is Vivu, and the other one is Taser. They scored the highest in every category. Where we are this month is we are basically doing some initial product testing, and we are shooting for February the 28th to start field testing. And in essence, at that point, we will have 6 body-worn camera units from both vendors will be tested consecutively in the field. We're looking at District 3 to serve as the location for that field testing. Policies and procedures is an ongoing, policies and procedures development is an ongoing endeavor. Again, once we have something that reflects a substantive draft document, clearly we will bring that back to the council. We will share that with the mayor. We will share that with ourselves as an administration, and we will begin to also share that with our community stakeholders to seek feedback as we try to vet those policies and procedures. Again, we're doing this knowing that there is an effort at the state legislative level, currently through House Bill 407, which is going to be looking at body-worn cameras from a policy legislative standpoint. It's highly likely that that legislation will not be passed by the time we're ready to implement, but we're doing our best to try to anticipate, knowing that whatever we do implement by way of policies and procedures will likely be impacted in some way by any state legislative changes, but we're still proceeding full steam ahead. In terms of next steps, I'm going to ask Captain Weissman to sort of take us through what those next steps are.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So many of the bullet points that I'm dropping in here right now have already been discussed or talked about, and we're kind of already through that, so I'm going to quickly get through this. The tech review of the RFP responses is something the city manager just talked about. We are now in February of 2016, so we are hitting that initial product testing. So you may see Ryan Smith walking around Over the Rhine talking to himself. He's recording the audio and the video on the body-worn cameras as he walks through the streets of Over the Rhine and other places of Cincinnati. And so moving forward, as the city manager said, we'll be doing the field testing that starts February 28th in District 3 on second shift, and then we would want to move it sometime in March, near the end of March, for a 30-day period on third shift so that we could see what it records, how the video does at night. And that's sort of aligned with the template of training or testing that we did back in 2013 and 14 when we did this the first time. Once that happens, the technical advisors would come to the selection committee, which is 7 members that I'm the chairman of. They would give us their report on their field testing, and we would score the vendors. And once we score the vendors, our committee will make a recommendation to the city manager which vendor we believe is most advantageous for the city. At that point, the city team would start to kick into developing a contract with the vendor, which may take some time. I don't know how long. And then they would, stop here. Community engagement would start because we would then develop the policies and procedures that the city manager was talking about. And then we would start to get into training, which would probably start in June, May or June. And then we would have our phase 1 rollout. So if you look on the notes of the document that we provided you, the rollout planning, so actually after the contract is done and we've signed the contract and we start taking delivery of the body cams, we would be taking delivery of nearly 700 cameras. It would take some logistical, we have to record the serial numbers for each body cam, which officer is going to be assigned which body cams, and so we have to go through a process to do that. It could take a couple of weeks. Once we're done with that, we would start phase 2 rollout, which would be the actual deployment. So we hope for our target date is to start at July 1. So start at July 1 with, say, for instance, we have been talking about this with central business section. A little bit less officers working down there, easy place to go. Start rolling it out in central business section. And then we believe that we will do a phased rollout throughout the rest of the year to the other 6 locations that we would go to, districts 1 through 5, traffic section, K-9 unit, and a couple of other operational units. We believe that it could take as long as 6 months to incrementally build this process, so starting in July and then ending in December. And then we would do the evaluation of the program in January of 2017. So once the 700 cameras were fully operational, we would start to go back and take a look at it and see how well it's working. Is it stressing the system? And then consider expanding from there to other areas of the department. And that would be the phase 3 evaluation. Questions?
Just want to also acknowledge Chief Isaac. So we're here to respond to any questions that you might have pursuant to this presentation.
First, I just want to thank all of you for all of your hard work and all of the people that have been spending a tremendous amount of your time to get this right. My public statement is one of deep respect for the process and my colleagues, but I want to be clear. It is my hope that my colleagues will respect this process and consider, as they are introducing motions around this subject matter, that they will do so through the chair of Law and Public Safety. What we don't want to do is continue to put out fires as people are reading headlines in newspapers or on the internet, and then it causes someone to now introduce motions to try to impact this process. We are moving as fast as we possibly can, and I think that's the message. And what we're trying to do is get it right so that this is not personality driven, this is not someone trying to grab a headline. This is really about trying to get a very serious matter right. And I love the thoughtfulness of rolling it out, taking the cameras and going into areas and seeing what kind of audio, what does it visually look like at night. So again, we're doing all of that field testing so that obviously your team wants to be right when we deploy body cameras for all of our police departments. So I just want to make that one statement and turn it over to my vice chair. I have a lot to say about the subject matter, but I want to give him time to ask and probe questions, and many of the questions he'll ask probably are questions I'd like to ask. But as the chair, because I want everybody to know that we've invited every member of council to come today to be a part of this. So anybody, any member of council could have been a part of this, and this is, I'm not speaking to their schedules and maybe why they're not here. I don't want to, that's not the message. The message I really want to send as the chair is that I have ownership of this subject matter, and that I would appreciate all motions, all ordinances coming through the chair and not just submitted with 5 signatures, because there's a process that I want to make sure is respected. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the thoughtfulness you've given to this since I've been serving on this committee with you. And Captain Wiseman, you know, you've really led the team that has really done a deep dive into creating, as I said, what are going to be the best practices for the country. And these policies, you know, sometimes transparency is a word that's thrown around. Not here in Cincinnati. Not with this. This is something that has been at the forefront since the beginning of these discussions, and developing the policies that will enable us to give confidence to our citizens that we're not hiding something when we're doing this. In fact, it's just the opposite. We're attempting to get state-of-the-art information out there so that the truth can be discovered. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that has been going into this as the process has been moving forward. So any idea that we're trying to hide information, I think, needs to be dispelled. In fact, it's the opposite. And I think if we had jumped in a year ago, the project probably would have failed at this point. No question. Because we would have had to been going frame by frame to redact, because we also have to protect those people who we've heard from on this committee time after time after time say, we know there are people out there that saw a crime. The street was filled with people that saw a crime, but they're afraid to come forward. They're afraid because people are going to come after them. And that's one of the things that I think has also been part of the policy decisions that are being developed here, is protecting our witnesses and also just the innocent bystanders that happen to be caught on video at a crime scene. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into this, and it's not just a matter of picking between Taser and Vivu. It's a matter of developing a real program. And one of the things Captain Wiseman, as the head of as the SWAT commander, said, you know, it's not just that each officer is going to need a camera. There's a SWAT situation, 30 members are going to be called in. We don't want them having to go to their district and then come to an emergency situation. We're going to have 30 cameras for those SWAT people. And then there's 30 different views of a situation that may extend for hours. So the issues that are being addressed are very serious and very real issues. And I, for one, am just glad that this team has been working on this. That's not to say that council doesn't have a role in this, but I think when the product is rolled out, when the policies and procedures are rolled out, first of all, relative to investigatory techniques, I don't think anybody up here will be, other than maybe Mr. Young, is qualified to make those determinations. But I have the utmost confidence that the policies and procedures will protect the transparency for our citizens.
I want to take the opportunity to highlight Vice Mayor Minette Cooper. And I've said this 5, 6, 7 times along the way when she was working on cameras for cruisers, and there was tremendous pushback at the time about having cameras in cruisers. And we have all evolved, policing has evolved to understand that those cameras in those cruisers are protecting our officers out there, and has really changed the whole landscape of what the citizen is saying is happening. I'm comfortable with our trained police department. We are the best in the country, period. But we have citizens that we're engaging that had different narratives. But now we can just hit rewind and say, no, that's really what happened. Just like the police-involved shooting, unfortunate, but the man who had his hands up just in the last month, and the 2 officers responded, giving command after command after command to comply. And that citizen, even being told what to do, Chief, moved his hands down to his coat and then came back to kind of a half position with his hands up. But the officers behind at night didn't know what in the world that citizen was doing. And then just in some instance, it was amazing, turned his body into a position where he was pointing something at the officers, and the officers had to use deadly force. But that video camera from the cruiser clearly illuminated what occurred and left no doubt in anybody's reasonable mind of what occurred. Well, our officers are following people on foot. They're going into apartment buildings. They're going down alleys. And what we want to do is continue to have that footage so everybody is clear in practical terms of what is occurring, and it is to protect our police officers. The other thing that I want to say is that I hope that our community leadership will not throw tomatoes at our diligence of trying to get this right, because I've heard some of that chatter. And our community partners need to understand that we're doing everything we can to protect everyone's interests, not just their interests, not just the police department's interests, not just the media's interest, but everybody's interest. And when you're trying to do something like that, it takes time to get it right. And so standing out on the sidelines and throwing tomatoes at the process doesn't help. What helps is actually rolling up your sleeves and getting on one of the committees and coming down and giving testimony. And I don't have a problem saying some of the things that maybe some of the teammates can't say, but I can say. And as a public figure, it is my job to provide that kind of leadership on these kinds of issues. I'm hoping that our community partners will engage us in an honorable and respectful way. We want their input. We want their substantive input on the process of what we're trying to do. We want their support. But we're not just going to put cameras on the street because we can buy some hardware and load up everybody without a thoughtful process. And there are people, unfortunately, who believe that it is that easy. And even though for everybody in the room, and I'm talking to the choir, remember that this presentation will loop 7, 10 times for the public to actually view it and hear it. And it's important for me to articulate these perspectives because I'm pushing back on a variety of narratives that we hear out on the radio or that maybe we even read in the paper. So anyway, I don't have any further questions. I think that your presentation was comprehensive, and I just want to thank everybody for your service. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Nothing at this time, Mr. Chairman, other than thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Now, while the chief is here, I'd like to ask him a couple of questions. And I appreciate that smile. You're like, Smitherman, I thought I was about to get out and roll out, Cat. And I want to spend some time and I know these are important to you, the Crow case and the Kennebrew case. I want to make sure, and I know that your detectives are working on these cases. They're high profile. Is there any information or any updates you might have, or any of your command staff might have, on any of those cases that are, I'm not going to consider them cold, but when we were over in Westwood, we just got a heart-wrenched testimony from the Crow family about the loss of their daughter as one example. Shot yet again, and just going through those facts at Walnut Hills, a Sweet 16 party, as she's coming out of Melrose Y, sitting in her car, minding her business, at least 100 witnesses around and in the street. We know that there are people who know exactly what happened and have not come forward. But Chief, have we made any progress on any of those two cases, is my question.
What I can say is you're absolutely right. I spoke to the Crow family as well at the town hall meeting, and I assured them that not only their case, but China Kennebrew's case as well, neither one of those cases have grown cold. We continue to work on the investigations. They continue to progress. There's nothing that I can share publicly at this point.
I appreciate and understand.
But the investigations continue. We are making progress, and they are still being actively investigated.
And my last comment, and I appreciate your comments, Chief, is I want to just again commend the administration, commend you and your leadership. You know, you had tough decisions to make with promotions. I mean, really talented candidates across the board. But I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness in the process, the city manager's thoughtfulness in the process. They should understand it was his decision. But, you know, when Specialist Johnson, you know, gave his presentation on the history of the Sentinels, I saw you nodding your head from time to time as he went through those historical points. And I don't think we've done a good enough job emphasizing that you are the first African-American police chief in 200 years that has come from the rank and file of the Cincinnati Police Department and now presiding over this police department, who happens to be African-American. That last part is very important, because it's not affirmative action, it's not any of that stuff. This is about a qualified person. And the history of that, I think, is so important to be noted. I run into people who still are confused because they continue to hear a lot of different narratives out there. But that's going to be a very important part of history some 50, 20, 100 years from now, that somebody from the police department who happened to be African American served. And of course, the two previous African American police chiefs, you know, I'm not taking away from their contributions to our department, but there is something different about your leadership and where you've come from and how you've served in all of these different capacities within the Cincinnati Police Department, and now you have risen to chief. And I want to just say that how sensitive I am to that history and how important it is, I think, to reiterate it during Black History Month today. And I appreciate your leadership. I think your sensitivity on how you just handled the sergeant's list is remarkable. To me, it's a change in leadership. You know, we're going to recognize those who took tests, and we're not just going to try to ruffle the feathers of our great fraternal order of police organization just to ruffle feathers, and we're not going to try to impact morale just because we have the power to impact and do things. It doesn't mean we should do them because we have the power to do it. And I just want to recognize that. The public doesn't, I think, it won't fully appreciate the decisions that were recently made, but I certainly recognize it, and I know the rank and file in this police department, they certainly understand it, and I know that my vice chair, he certainly understands it, and I just appreciate your leadership and the sensitivity of how you managed what could have been a major conflict that you just brought to zero. And the chairman of Law and Public Safety wants to publicly thank you for your leadership on that. I don't have any other business, Vice Chair. Do you have business?
Just, I know the District 5 pivot meeting is Monday the 22nd at the College Hill Rec Center, Community Center on Belmont Avenue. Is there one more before that?
No, the holiday yesterday, that is the next one.
Okay, so the next one up is District 5, Monday the 22nd.
Yes, sir.
I would encourage, you don't just have to live in District 5, you can come from across the city if you haven't had a chance to hear this new policing strategy. I think you'll be not surprised because we are leaders in this, but it is a truly innovative way of integrating things that we've done piecemeal in the past, and is a really great start. And but it does take the community involvement as well to make this work. And so please come.
And see,
I couldn't agree more. I'm sorry.
No, Chief.
Couldn't agree more. We've had great attendance so far. Certainly anybody from across the city is welcome to attend, just to hear their perspectives and their input, to gather their input. It's a tremendous opportunity, and I do thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Flynn, for allowing the Sentinel Police Association to come and to share our history. It is a rich history that many of us are very proud of. We're seeing a tremendous change in the history of the department here in recent times. I mean, to see the number of African Americans promoted to the command staff, captain and above, to see female officers promoted to those positions. This is a tremendous time in the history of our city and our police department. And it's something that we recognize and we take very seriously. So again, I just wanted to say thank you for that opportunity to share and to recognize. And to your point, none of this is possible without the input of the community. I think this presentation that we had the opportunity to share with you today, the body camera system, I believe this is a very significant turn in the evolution of policing nationally. Everything that we're doing, we're keeping in mind, and we recognize the charge given to us by council and the city administration, but everything that we do, we're keeping in mind transparency and accountability. We're voluntarily wanting to be transparent and accountable for our actions, and I believe this body cam system will bring that to our officers and to the department. And we're going to make every effort to make sure that the community is a viable part of this process. So thank you for allowing us to be here this morning.
And the citizens should know, the Vice Chair Flynn, you know, we're not just listening, we're listening, we're taking notes, and we're taking action. And, you know, just like on 42, you know, I saw after that the meeting that one of the speed machines was placed on 42, and I sent out a tweet about it to the CPD saying, hey, thanks. It was a very important thing. And so as we have these meetings, the community, we're actually taking action. We want to hear about properties that are giving you problems and nuisance problems. So we really hope that College Hill as my vice chair has indicated, we hope people show up to participate. Captain Wiseman, now I'm going to blame this on my vice chair because I was about to close things out. I had a question for the chief, and now I have a question for Captain Wiseman. Will you give us an update on the recruit class and how they are doing, and how many recruits are still in the process, giving us a number. So I want to share, and I know you've just done a lot of work with coming up with training and supervising that process. So I just wanted to get your sense of how it's going.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'll let you know there's been a change in leadership among a lot of the captains. So today is my second day as the Criminal Investigations Section Commander. So let me put a call in to Captain Russ Neville at the Academy to see how that Academy's doing. But I'm kidding. We still have 53 recruits. I believe they are in their 6th week of training. They will graduate Friday, July 1st at the Masonic Temple down on 5th Street. You will certainly be invited to that, as all council and the mayor will be. They are doing great. It is very challenging for them, as you know, and I will put a call in to Captain Neville to make sure that he invites you and your staff to that Red Man demonstration and scenario training that they do in June and July right before they graduate.
Also would like, I definitely want to attend that, and I think it's important that we highlight that we still need a second recruit class, in my estimation. So, I bring up the recruit class. My vice chair, I know, and I are in sync here that we need another class to start in July. That's our wish. And as we march through February so quickly, I want to say that's still on the forefront because we're only keeping up with attrition. And as we go out to the community meetings, we've, I think, done a good job of articulating that we're not adding new police in the sense, we're only keeping up with the complement. I don't know how many people are going to retire this year, but I'm going to estimate and say it's going to be 40. It's going to be significant. And so we bring on 53, 55, 52 recruits that come up. We're almost just keeping up with those officers who are retiring. So in order to push the number up, we actually need another recruit class. And I think that's a good place to end us. Do you have any other business? Okay, let me thank Attorney Nestor, Captain Fink, Courtney Porter, our clerk, my legislative aide, Courtney Hauser, my vice chair, Kevin Flynn. I thank you. We're going to hold all the items on the agenda. If there isn't any other business to come before this committee, we are officially adjourned.